Okay, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We're in the council chambers of Waynfleet. Is there any disclosure of interest or general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll go on. Adoption of the agenda. I need a mover and a seconder. Scott? Mr. Hoyle? All in favor? No. Okay, we're good. Okay. Approval of minutes from June 17th, 2024. Is any corrections or nothing? All in favor of approval? That's carried. Okay, I need a mover and a seconder on that. Councilor Hoyle? CEO Louie? Scott? Scott? All in favor? That's approved. Business arising from previous meetings. Comparators of shared services across Ontario. Morgan, you want to go to that?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. What I've provided here, I was able to gather a list from the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs of municipalities that currently share fire chiefs, not so much full amalgamated departments, but just that have a shared administrative role. Some of which you'll see I've provided kind of a commentary on some of the lessons learned, and some of the pros and cons of the different models that have been utilized. And then lastly, also kind of some of the natural progressions that has occurred, over the decade that some of these that have been used. So for that, I think I'll just look to the committee members. If they have any questions of staff, then we can kind of review and go forward from there.
Sure. Through the chair to the chief, I know about these examples from the past. I just from my career have been exposed to them and whatnot. But I think there's more that exist or have existed and sort of gone by the wayside in Ontario. How did you choose this list? Was there a criteria? Did you exclude some for reasons of practicality, like they didn't apply to our situation or they didn't have the same parameters that we're looking at or something like that? Or did you choose these as best practices? Was there a criteria for that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, these are the ones that utilize a shared chief. So the others, like Huntsville Lake of Bays, they had used a shared chief model for years and years, and they have now gone to a fully amalgamated system. So that's why they were left off, because the last meeting we talked about full amalgamation wasn't to be considered. Perfect.
Appreciate that answer. And then the second question, probably my last one on this, sorry, unless we get into it, a little deeper dive. The comments are great, and I appreciate them, the analysis, I guess, for lack of a better term. But I'm just going to ask you if they're all, like how you got them, basically. I see the one from Perth and Perth East, or West Perth and Perth East, says the fire chief there has provided comments from his experience there, but the other ones don't say that. Did you reach out to each of these municipalities and sort of survey, survey is probably not the best, inquire as to pros and cons and successes and pitfalls and so on to get these comments, the 4 pages of analysis?
Yes.
Is that how you did it?
So through you, Mr. Chair, yeah. In the case of Midland and Penetanguishene, I actually called the fire chief there directly. He's new to the role. He's been doing that shared role for about 3 years. They're almost at 10 years now, and they're currently going through a feasibility study because of the lessons learned through their shared chief role, which I've highlighted here. In the case of West Perth, Perth East, that is literally his email to me based on the lessons learned. In the case of West Niagara, I spoke with Chief Hudson there. and kind of the lessons learned. And then in the case of Minto, Wellington, and Wellington North and Mapleton, that's also I contacted Chief Chris Harrow and spoke about their lessons learned, and that's there. And then Huntsville, Lake of Bays, again, that was they've gone through a couple of chiefs, and the most recent one was the one that pushed forward the amalgamation. So that's just where the history of the different models came from.
That's what I needed to know, and I appreciate that. I said one last that would be the last question, but then I remembered I was in February in April in an elevator with a council member from pretty sure it was Rockland. Rockland is also shared service, right?
That is correct, yes. They do have a shared chief model, yep.
Right, and through the chair, I casually inquired, how's it going? And he said, like, best thing we've ever done or something to that effect. The reason I tell you that story is, in addition to these phone calls and inquiries to these municipalities, do you, in your day-to-day, or even when you go to a fire chiefs conference or when you go to an event where there's people gathered from all over Ontario, do you hear about these things, these places, and do you get pros, cons, positive, negative feedback on them?
Through the chair, yes, when I do attend, but to be honest, this particular topic hasn't really been on my radar up until March, April of this year. So it's not really something until I was asked to pursue that I really started to get the information.
Okay. Anyone else? So I have a question for you. So generally, when you go to these fire conferences, and I don't know the fire industry at all, but I do know the industry I'm in, and there's pros and cons, and people look at things positively and negatively. What is the overall perception or review of people joining up? Municipalities working together to try to have joint services like this. Is this something in general that the fire industry doesn't like because they think it's going to cut jobs or less jobs in their industry? Like, what is there a general conception that that's what's going to happen in this?
So through you, Mr. Chair, there are 444 municipalities in the province of Ontario. Every single one of them are unique and different. And with that, what you have here is a snapshot of those municipalities that have attempted it. As I said, some have moved on to full amalgamation. Of the chiefs that I've spoke to, they believe that this is the way forward. As we are all aware, fire services are becoming increasingly expensive to operate. And for smaller municipalities, and for most, that's why I think even regionalization, I said it, was a topic at one point, because at some point we have to understand that while it is a municipal responsibility through the FPPA, it is an expensive one, and as municipalities, we need to do what's best to deliver the services that our community expects, and if that means that having to share sometimes, that's the best way forward.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Span of responsibility comparatives to the other Niagara Regional Fire Departments. I'll put that.
Yeah, I think the question here that was brought up to you, Mr. Chair, was about the ability for a shared management team to be able to handle a department as this. And yes, I will admit, as a chief, having to deal with, 3 collective agreements, 2 municipal councils, 2 municipal budgets, that is something that, as the chief, would have to manage. But I think when you look at kind of the span of responsibility that I have here, when you look at other municipalities, whether it be population, square kilometers, the number of stations, the size of fleet, the personnel, it's not impossible. It's not out of the realm of what's expected for a chief or an administrative team in today's day and age. Obviously, there will be increased workload, which is why, the deputy and myself would not be able to do this, just the two of us. There would be additional resources required, but it's not impossible. And that's what this was meant to show, is when you compare what this model would look like to the other municipalities, in department size and operation, it is manageable.
Okay. Any questions? Councilor Hoyle?
Through the chair, just a quick question. I'm looking at Lincoln and Grimsby, which they're doing shared, right?
Correct.
So they're sharing the chief, so you have a .5. They both have their separate deputy chiefs, and then together it'd be 2 FPOs, and then 2 training,
That's correct. Yep.
and they're dividing it up, whatever percentage. I imagine Grimsby's putting more of the bill than Lincoln, right? I would imagine. Well, bigger population. I'm just trying to figure out how this would fit into Port and Wainfleet's situation. But if I look at the numbers, the population, we're like almost all except for Thorold don't have full-time. I'm just looking at the averages here. So, just had a question. Is this how we see it, as bringing in, dividing up the chief and then bringing in another deputy chief as one of the options?
Sorry, what is the question, Counselor?
Oh, I'm just trying to figure this out on how this worked for us. So it'll be 2 deputy chiefs in Port, I mean, not Port, but in the grouping, and then 1 yourself, and then 1 FPO? Is that the idea?
Yeah, so the next,
Or am I going ahead of slide?
yeah, just ahead, yeah, item C does talk about the financial options and what that org chart would look like.
Okay, so there's no more questions on item B. Let's go to C, and you can answer that one.
Yeah, and I think I'll look to, did you want to take this one, Mallory? It's up to you. Okay, yeah. So the treasurers for both municipalities met based on council or the committee's direction, and did a cost analysis of the options. One being status quo, as 2 chiefs, 2 deputies, 2 independent departments. Option 2 would be 1 chief and 2 deputies, utilizing the Port Colborne pay grid scale. Option 3 is 1 chief and 2 deputies using the Wainfleet pay grid and scale. And then option 4 is 1 chief, a deputy, and an assistant deputy, also using the Wainfleet grid. The assistant deputy, you'll see when you look at the organizational chart, I hadn't built that in. It was just a model to show if you did want to have that extra layer of rank. The savings are, it's about $8,000 per municipality in savings, whereas for the value there, it's option 4 doesn't really provide what I think we're looking for here. But 2 and 3, that's kind of where the org chart that you see behind was built on. And I guess really it's just the committee, at this point, the committee's looking at options 1, 2, and 3 and what model best works.
Okay, does, we want to get Cameron to comment on this, or no?
I think so. Through the chair to the committee. So just to comment on that, when the chief says Wainfleet's pay grid and pay scale versus Port Colborne's pay grid and pay scale, that would mean that that municipality would be the employer of the group of administrative employees. So we can't have Port Colborne employees operating on the Wainfleet grid or Wainfleet employees operating on the Port Colborne grid. So just to keep that in mind when reviewing the options. As well as, so option 2 and option 3. At this point, I guess we would be looking, so the intent or our hope is that we can go to council, to a joint council meeting with a recommendation from this committee. So if there are any committee members that have maybe any options that they don't see here that they would like to see in terms of a split or personnel, then we're happy to take that back and review and come up with a different financial model if that's what you see fit.
Any questions?
Through the chair, my question is, I'm looking at this and I see the 2 deputies, it says Port Colborne, so that's in the Port Colborne scale. But what if one is in each? Because technically, there should be someone in Port and there should definitely be someone in Wainfleet, besides where the chief will be in this, because in this cost, does it have the chief also on there?
So through the chair to Councillor Hoyle, so it doesn't necessarily mean that that's where all of the employees are going to live. It's just going to be, they can't have 2 separate employers. And with the financial modeling and with Port's grid versus Wainfleet's grid, if one of them was an employee of Port and 2 of them were an employee of Wainfleet, there would be less cost savings and likely the deputy would earn more than the chief, which in a hierarchy situation, that doesn't exactly work. So they would all have to be employees of one municipality or the other. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's where their office will be, that that's where their time will spend, that that's how the time will be split up. That is an operational thing that council can have input on those levels of service. This is purely the financial modeling and how it has, basically it doesn't necessarily work out if that's not the case and we're not looking at apples to apples.
Go ahead, Council.
Yeah, through the chair to, I don't know, the chief or maybe to Councillor Hoyle's comment, like my position is unique because when I sit here, I'm a committee member, but when I sit in my council chambers, I'm a staff person who's giving a recommendation to my council. So obviously, 2 different functions. Not that I can't handle both, I think I can, but, you know, looking at these numbers are actually better than I thought they would be, 100,000, 220,000 in savings, but I'm not as motivated by financial savings. Like if I'm motivated by efficiency and effectiveness of the service that we're going to deliver to both municipalities. So if it's way, way, way better and it costs an extra buck, it's okay with me. But if it saves 100,000 and it's not better, it's worse. I can't recommend it to my council. I mean, if it saves them someone, like there's some middle ground there where if it saves a little bit and it stays the same quality-wise, but I want a safe, effective, efficient fire department for both municipalities. So my questions are more on the org chart, if I can take you there. And to Councillor Hoyle's point, Chief, you have these 2 deputies on this org chart divided by function rather than, say, chief of, you know, in my mind's eye, chief of Wainfleet and Port Colborne, deputy chief Wainfleet, deputy chief Port Colborne. That's a different model that's not expressed here, I think is what he's asking, if I can put words in his mouth. Can you just explain why you propose this model instead of that? And I'll ask a follow-up right away if that's okay, Chair. In practical application, because we always design things, but then we have to go out and actually do them. And when is the practical application the same as we projected? Where will people be stationed, managers? Like, is there office hours in both municipalities, I guess, is my follow-up question after you answer the first one.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So this was built, again, based on the lessons learned from previous municipalities. So when we look at the Midland Penetang model, they did that. Penetang had their own deputy, Midland had their own deputy. They were not cross-appointed, only the chief was. So in the event, and although they had automatic gate agreements, if the deputy of Penetang came into Midland, there was no authority to operate as an administrator, as a deputy, or there was no delegated authority as chief. What that left is 2 very standalone departments, and that duplication of efforts still occurred. In Penetang, the deputy chief was responsible for fire prevention, training, coordination, all of that, no different than the deputy of Penetang Machine. That's where those that's where the savings would be, is reducing that duplication and having that specialties. So when we look at the Minto Wellington North model, that's exactly the approach they took. Is it is a shared administrative team with individuals having specialties that all municipalities have access to, regardless of wherever they work from, right? I mean, even gathering most of this and putting this report together, half my time was spent at my Wainfleet office, half my time, and you can ask the crews, was spent at my port office. It doesn't matter where we work from, as long as there's presence and as long as the work is getting done. And so in this model where we have a chief and 2 deputies, there is the opportunity for a deputy to be stationed at each and the chief to go whichever way the wind blows or his schedule takes them. But same thing with the deputy's role. If the training officer has to be in Port Colborne on a Tuesday to prep or Monday, that's where the deputy chief of training is. If he has to be in Monday in Port or in Wainfleet on Monday, then that's where he is. There has to be flow and flux to make sure that both municipalities are receiving the services of all 3.
Any other further questions?
Through the chair, just going back to this org chart, and I think I'm just maybe I just want you to state the obvious. These aren't all different people. These are responsibilities that flow under. So deputy chief, both sides, left and right, are people. Suppression down here are people, but these other ones are functions that fall under the 2 silos, or maybe that's not the best word, the 2 halves of the department are 2 separate sides, right?
Yes.
There's not 30 people working at
Through the chair, that is correct, yes. So that is the roles and responsibilities that each individual would, that's kind of their portfolio of their position.
Any further questions? Brian, anybody? Nope. We're good there. Let's go down. We'll go to D, to have final survey responses. So we'll put you on the seat again for that one more.
Yeah, through the chair, what I've done here is I've taken the results of the surveys and I've kind of put them in order of question that you guys can visually review the results. I don't think I'm going to go through every question. We'd be here till noon, but if the committee members have questions or comments themselves of the results that might have piqued your interest, we can certainly have those discussions.
Any questions? Okay, so I'll start on this one then. On your ranked questions, I really didn't like the way that was set up because there was probably 3 things that I agreed at their importance, but I couldn't rank the 3 of them the same. So now you're fighting with yourself. Where do I want to put this, and where is this more important to me than this and this? And some things that I thought were equally as important ended up being placed 3rd, which to me was wrong. And then on mine, I kind of asked that it be separated for Wainfleet Council, Port Council, Wainfleet volunteers, Port volunteers, and Port full-time, just so I get a better idea of who was doing what. You can pretty well tell what it was reading this thing, but like I said, I think some of it would be skewed on the council side more than anywhere when you were trying to rate, is equipment more important than cost, or is cost more important than training, and right? So when I was doing it, I had a struggle trying to get things where I thought they should be instead of, all of them being a 4, right? It was, you started with a 4 and some of them ended up at a 2, which wasn't where they probably should have been, but was part of my struggle doing that. So I don't know if anybody else has any comments or questions or.
Through the chair, my biggest thing is you can tell that, I'll say this nicely, but just run, like, employees that may have an issue with all this, it's noted in here You can see it, it's a lack of this, lack of that, and all that. Obviously, I do agree that staffing shortages, well, definitely important, but there's not enough volunteers at all. And training, yeah, I've already heard lots of training. I hear even training now from volunteers that it's still not there. So, I don't know if it's, I like the charts, I like the information, I just don't know if it's, because where I work at the state, you're always going to get employees' views of their own and kind of like shades what you're trying to get. I do get worried about the training. I do get worried about like comments like attitude, intimidation from full-timers. I mean, I hope that's not true. I just hope it's just someone that was, just happened to be upset, but that kind of doesn't sit well with me. Lack of leadership, well, we already knew that was there prior to even you coming on board, right? So I just trying to figure out where of this would be the most benefit that I can bring back to my fellow counselors to say what I would support at the end of the day. So it's not really a question, I just taken a survey of how this was conducted, and I just think it's more of how the person feels, and it's probably not the best to evaluate on that.
So if I can, and then the chief, no offense taken. When I started here 6 years ago, or getting close to that, that was our biggest complaint in town, was training, lack of training, no training. We had the ministry coming down ready to pretty well shut down our fire department. It takes time to get the training there. If our culture had none, now if I read this, you can almost tell the guys from Wainfleet that said, we've got enough training, we have enough training, it's getting the guys to go to the training is the problem. I am sure with Chief Alcock, we'll have the same same issues in Port Colborne. They'll have the opportunity to train, they'll have all of that. It'll be, how do we get the guys, or how do we make it mandatory that they show up and take the training? And that'll have to come from that steering committee. I think will have to put some rules in that the guys have to get there and they have to show up for so much of it. Because he can beat his head against the wall, and Sean and your new deputy chief, but if we don't enforce that the guys show up, but it all takes time to get there. And I mean, reading ours, I think you've done a great job so far. So it'll happen there in Port as well. It just takes time.
I guess through the chair, if I can be next, I have a lot to say, and I don't know what order I should say it all in, but the survey, it's tough for me to go through. I appreciate all this feedback and the firefighters from both municipalities who participated, but and it's clearly there's a lot of emotion and passion about this, and I'm not afraid to say that probably this could have been handled better on the Port Colborne side of things. I think one of the problems that I was dealing with as staff was the suddenness of it. I can tell you that, like I have in my email, a report about, there's three things happening at once. Shared services, there's a labor issue in Port Colborne around a grievance because of the not replacing of a union firefighter. That's a separate and apart issue. The third issue is our chief left, and we had no chief, and we had to get one within 10 days.
Yeah.
So, but I can, they're kind of conflated into the answers of the survey. Sometimes I think that person's answering a question about one, but bringing in some passion about the other. Not to dispute that it's someone's reality. And to your point, Councillor Hoyle, about you hope it's not true about one of those comments. It's true for one person, and if that's their perception, then they're living that every day. That's their reality. Yep. Might not be the other 10 people on the shift or a couple of shifts, but having said that, one volunteer feels that way. What I'm building to is, I have in my email, maybe it's not fair to divulge, but to share with people, but I can tell you, I have a report that Chief Lawson was working on from, October or November about shared services. He was designing a shared service model for Waynfleet and Port Colborne, he was also designing one for a bigger group that included other municipalities. This work was taking place under previous administration's watch. It's not something that happened all of a sudden. The second thing, though, and maybe we should have engaged, the city at Port Colborne at least should have engaged our workers, our employees in both unions better. But then what happened, the next trigger was Chief Lawson saying he's leaving, and me having to quickly write a staff report and quickly engage the two presidents of the two associations. They weren't given, and one of them's here today, they weren't given a lot of notice about that happening, but I didn't have a lot of notice either. The third thing that I want to say, I don't know if there's an opportunity to go back, because what I'm reading in here is some of the passion, but I'm also reading a lot of lack of understanding, maybe not having all of the information, because there's some things in these answers that are just not correct, but they're based on somebody not having been told what is correct, right? You can't answer a question sometimes if nobody told you what's going on. And heck, maybe the mayor and the CIO should have stood on the floor of the fire hall and addressed the fire department workers before this whole thing took place. Setting that aside, we can't change the past, but we can do better moving forward. The trouble I have with the survey is if everybody knows what a bell curve is, usually you have most of the people agree, whether it's 80% of the people or 50% of the people, and then it sort of streams down from there. The answers here are so extreme. Sometimes, a person says we have a totally unsafe situation. A person says we have great safety. It's a reverse bell curve almost, where there's extremes and people who are on extremes, and it makes it hard to take the survey results forward in any kind of decision-making capacity. I think everything in here should be considered in our decision-making, but did I just get louder? Did somebody do that? Sounds, but it's hard to say, 80% of survey respondents want this, so let's do it. And so the numbers aren't there in a magnitude that I think is actionable, but I think there's definitely lessons that need to be learned from what people have shared with us in both municipalities and on the full-time and the volunteer side in Port Colborne. So I appreciate that, but that's my comments for, and maybe unbundle those three separate issues that are affecting Port Colborne at least, and maybe both, because I think they need to be on three separate paths, but I understand there's some crossover here.
Okay. Anybody else? Nope, we're good. Okay. Item 6, new business. Terms of reference, review of the term of the committee. Who wants to take that one? Valerie?
So through the chair to all of the committee, so I guess the hope was that Waynfleet's council breaks over the summer. So the term is going to, the current term is going to come to expiration August 8th. So our hope was that with the placeholder for the joint council meeting next week, our hope was that the committee could at least come up with a preferred option to recommend to both councils, or to recommend against, or we need to extend the agreement. Again, as I mentioned in previous meetings, continually extending it with no light at the end of the tunnel is not sustainable for the chief or deputy. We don't want them to get burned out, because then neither municipality will be in a favorable position. But in the short term, if we are working towards an option, or the committee has direction for us to go back and consider a third financial option, or if we have a preference to a financial option, then we're looking for that direction, and then we would have to make a recommendation to both councils to extend, just based on our council schedule. It doesn't align before the expiration date.
Any suggestions, Scott?
So, yeah, to the chair, we're making progress. We're making slow progress. I think we're eventually going to end up with a recommendation to, at least from me to my council and from your CAO to your council, about an option to pursue. That could be no change in the way we operate, status quo. Port Colborne will have to figure out a replacement fire chief, and whether or not they're going to replace the deputy chief, that's a political decision that will be made by council. Or if one of the three other options on the screen are going to be pursued, that's not going to be decided today. That's not going to be decided on Wednesday, I think it's July 17th, the proposed 16th, the joint meeting of council that we're holding a date for. But where we end up with a administrative problem is Port Colborne still needs that shared service, the temporary coverage, while the recruitment is on hold for a full-time permanent replacement chief. So 120 days, sitting there looking down the calendar at March 31st seemed like a lot of time. Here we sit at 95 days or whatever it is, and it wasn't a lot of time. So I guess, even if Port Colborne was to post the position, it would probably be 10 to 12 weeks before a person could assume the position, be recruited, hired, presumably give notice to their former employer that they're going to be leaving and going to Port Colborne and so on. So that's 3 months. 12 weeks is 3 months. August 8th plus 3 months is, the end of October, basically. But we have to have more meetings. Like, I guess, I don't know, I'd look to the chief. Could we say September 30th? Like almost like 2 dates. A date for the committee's work to be done and a recommendation to be before council, and then a date to extend the temporary coverage until, which should be 3 months past when council makes a decision, if you know what I mean.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, I think at this point, knowing that we're 1 month to the day from the end of this term, I see no reason why we can't just extend to another 2 months, so October 8th. But at some point, I think the committee is going to have to make its decision and recommendation to the joint council. So, I mean, the next thing, we have action items that the committee is supposed to work on after this. So I think, what is the action items that staff, like what is the committee's plan and schedule to provide a report to councils? And if it's not the 17th, if it's some point in August, like that's what the committee needs to decide, is what's its plan forward before I just arbitrarily set 2 months as the date. Like, what is our revised work plan? What is our schedule?
Any suggestions, thoughts?
So through the chair, I guess, is there any information that the committee feels that they need prior to us being able to make a recommendation? Just so we can work backwards from that in terms of a timeline, because if we feel like we have all the information that we need, I don't know how many more meetings we need prior to us being able to craft a recommendation.
So I'll look at it. We've got the financials here and where we're supposed to go. If we look at all the other municipalities, eventually, most of them ended up in an amalgamation, but it was 10 years, and that's kind of what we talked about originally, was in the 5 to 10 year range, because people have to get their heads wrapped around it and they have to see that it'll work, right? So if the population of Port Colborne, we do this joint, and 5 years from now, they haven't seen anything go backwards, it's all moved forwards, and Waynfleet has done the same thing. They talked about your loyalty to the department you're with, but it would be a new department then, right, that you would go to. So, whether you work for the town of Waynfleet or the city of Port Colborne, you're now going to work for a joint fire department. So you should be able to mix in over the 5 years and know this is coming to figure it out, or 10 years if that's what it takes. I think we just look at which one of these is going to give us the best service. I'm kind of the same mind as Scott. I care about what it costs us, but I really want to make sure that we get the right service for the people and nothing goes backwards from what we have today, right? We were, as Waynfleet, as I said, 6 years ago, we're in tough shape. We're in good shape now. I don't want to see us go backwards. Did it cost us money? It cost us a lot of money to get here, right? And your training side of it will cost you a bunch of money if that's what it really is to get there, right? If that's, or if it's just somebody's nose out of joint, I'm not sure, as Council Hoyle said. But the idea is to try and make something that works for both communities and is better for the general public, and that's what we have to do. I think the information is here. Yeah, there's going to be hiccups, there's going to be things that go wrong, but I think we have the information. It's just to decide how we're going to go with this and financially in the setup, right? Like Morgan says, he's going to spend 2 days here and 3 days there, and next week he's 4 days here because the wind blew him this way for things that went wrong, right? Or somebody was off, or there was an emergency. There's always, I like to say at work, I put out fires, but I can't say that about Morgan because that's what he's doing. But there's always something that goes wrong, and you have to put all your attention to it to fix it, right? So, yeah, I get it. Some days some weeks you'll be more time here. Some weeks we won't even see you. But that's okay as long as the work's getting done and we're covered, right? I'm not naive enough to think that you're going to go over to Port Colborne and work for them all the time and we'll get nothing, right? But I do know it's going to go both ways, and I think we just have to get council to look at it that way, and maybe there has to be some chatter from us to the councilors. And
Oh, yeah, through the chair, I agree 100%. I know, going back to the survey, some of the questions that were answered speak about things like how could one person be the chief of two municipalities, or will there be burnout and things like this. But there are places in Ontario where they didn't get a choice. In Hamilton, which was amalgamated, I don't know if it was 6 departments or some number of departments into one chief. Yeah. The province said, go figure it out. You only have one chief now. Yeah. And they made it work. We have a chance here to make our own choice instead of having it forced upon us and build the system if we decide to go down that path. I think as a committee member now, taking off my staff hat and putting on my committee member hat, I would like to direct staff to sort of come back with one of these two options. In my mind, this is an awkward part of the conversation is the chief is here and he's the one who's going to be earning the pay. And we can see that the pay is different depending on how it works. But if it's option 2, Port Colborne, and I guess there's a question of who's sharing with whom, who's the sharer and who's the sharee. But at the end of the day, when it's over, there's something that I'd like people to be able to wrap their head around. If it is pursued, the person is the chief. The person is the chief of Port Colborne. The person is the chief of Wainfleet. It's not Port Colborne's chief is over here today. It's not Wainfleet's deputy chief is over here today. They are the fire administration. So one of these two options, and of course still bringing forward status quo. I don't favor assistant deputy. I like the equality of 2 deputies. And start to funnel those down into building pros and cons for both models for both councils to consider. So if it's a motion, I would move that we ask staff to continue working on option 1 and option 2, which is Port Colborne as the employer with the 60-40 split. I don't know if we want to talk about that more, if there's a seconder or what have you, but I think we need to funnel down to what's going to be before both councils. If it's not time yet to decide, so through the chair to the CIO, it could be the first 3 options, but again, making progress towards narrowing down the options, having pros and cons, knowing the benefit of each one, but as well as the pitfalls, and maybe some more engagement of fire. So like obviously from these survey, this is one thing I didn't say, sorry I'm rambling a bit. From this survey, Port Colborne has some morale and culture issues that need to be addressed. They're going to have to be addressed regardless of what model's pursued and regardless of who's sitting in that seat. We don't live in a world where the sailors get to choose the captain, but maybe they should have some voice because they do have skin in the game and do have to live with the permanent structure.
Through the chair, if I could get also the the splitting for option 2 and 3, the chief's wage added to that, in that number, for option 2 and 3? Just, I like an overview of the whole model.
Through the chair, the chief's wage is included
Is
in
it
this.
there?
Yes.
So through the chair, just for clarity, that's one chief, two deputies, salary and benefits. And no administration, no secretarial?
Through the chair to Scott, yes, that's correct. It's, the fire chief is in every option and two deputies and no admin.
So that's already included in the numbers you're showing us? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because when you look at it, it doesn't really say
Yeah,
that, so
yeah,
that's why I
That's
brought
what I
it up.
thought when I was reading it, that it was all there, but
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. okay, so we need a motion to,
Scott made the motion, I'll second the motion,
okay.
for staff to come back with a more streamlined pros and cons approach with options 1 to 3.
Okay. All in favor? So we got that. Any other comments?
Through the chair to chief, it just popped into my head, and maybe it's small potatoes, but because I was looking at the breakdown of the costs that were included. Council needs as much information as possible. The committee needs as much information as possible. It occurs to me that there would be other savings. Again, maybe small potatoes. Is there savings in vehicles, insurance, cell phones, conference attendance that eventually should be calculated and sort of included? Because we're talking about salary and benefits here, but I'm thinking of those two red trucks that are sitting at the back of the fire hall in Port Colborne and not going anywhere right now. Not that it's premature to do anything now, but is there going to be other economies of scale that are achieved as we move forward? You don't even have to answer that now, but I'd like to see that included in whatever financials we're looking at in the future.
So you got that, Chief? The other question I had was, somewhere in here I was reading about the split on workman's comp, the way Wainfleet plays it against Ports. At the end of the year, it's a wash, it comes out to basically the same amount of money, or is it, how does that work out?
So through the chair to all of the committee, so no, because Port Colborne is a Schedule 1 employer and we're a Schedule 2 employer, they're self-funded. So we true up at the end of each
Yeah.
year, where that's not the case for Port Colborne.
Okay. So then if we went option 3 with using Wainfleet's pay scale, then at the end of the year, there'd be a cost to them that you up to us? Share that? And otherwise, if we go with option 2, then we would have to, that cost would come to us as well, right? So they got to figure that in on our end?
So that would be something that we would
Yeah.
consider, and that would be drafted in an agreement if we got to a final
Yeah,
agreement.
just-
Those are all things to be considered, which is why they're noted at this stage.
As Scott was saying, trucks, little minor stuff, but it all comes out, right? In the wash, we want it all there and no surprises to anybody afterwards, or somebody says you didn't tell us the whole truth, right? So, okay. So you've got that?
Just through you, Mr. Chair. So in addition to the pros and cons of options 1 through 3, we also have to look into any other savings, material savings, vehicles, conferences, training, cell phones, anything else. We'll, as staff, we'll sit down, we'll kind of brainstorm. If any of the committee members have any ideas as well, please email them to me so that way we can take them into consideration. These are just the ones that I got out of the discussion. So that way we can kind of take some time and capture them as well. So just, I guess with this, now this is our action item for the next committee meeting. Is it safe to assume that the July 17th joint council meeting will not be required?
Or should we bring them what we have here?
So Through the chair to, I guess I'm looking to Port Colborne. Without that meeting, I will have to try to amend our agenda for tomorrow for you guys, in order for you guys to have a chief come past August 8th, because I don't have a meeting until September after my meeting tomorrow night, unless we host that meeting. But if that's the only purpose of the meeting, then I can just amend our agenda. I'm smiling nicely at Amber, just in case.
So we'll have to make a motion then to extend this till, let's put the 1st of November down. That work?
I think the chief had a date in mind. Was it September 8th or October 8th?
October 8th puts us at 2 months from the original end
Oh,
date.
from the original, yeah.
Yeah.
But then November 3rd or November 1st is A-okay with me. It just, that way we get through the 2 council meetings in October if we wanted to bring business forward. So on that basis, I'd make a motion that both councils be respectfully requested to extend the temporary coverage to November 1st, 2024.
Yeah, I'll second that. Doesn't mean we have to run that long. We can end this sooner, right? But yeah.
Sorry, through the committee chair, just talking to my council member here. If Wainfleet amends their agenda, I think if Port Colborne can bring something on July 23rd when our council meeting is, we'd be making a bit of a leap of faith that council is going to approve that. But I think the absence of a fire chief is a worse outcome than not extending. We would not have the July meeting of joint council meeting.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so through the chair to Scott, if we have no business to talk about on the 7th, and it's the 17th, which I'm hearing Mayor Steele's away. So yeah, if we can amend our agenda just to have that extended, and the committee's not in a position to make a recommendation to both councils, then I would suggest that we don't have a need for that meeting at this time.
Okay, so I just, we probably should have sometime after September, mid-September, a joint meeting, just so we can get other councilors making sure that they're on board with this, because we want to get this done. I don't know if there's anybody on our side that's gonna, you're talking about amalgamation here, and right, we gotta kind of get this in a joint meeting and get it done so that we come to November and we're still not arguing if we're going to get this done or not, or don't know if we have the votes, right? So,
Full agreement from the staff side. I think we don't want to have a meeting for the sake of having a meeting, but council does deserve some updates, but also the staff who are working under both arrangements, or both municipalities under this arrangement, need a date that they can sort of look forward to and say, hey, this is going to come to a conclusion. So in the interest of fairness for all, I think if we can get the clerks of both municipalities to today, or like at this point in time, set a meeting which gives us a long runway, make sure everyone's available on one of the weeks that there's not already a council meeting for one or the other of the municipalities, that will be good. I know that I send a weekly email to my council. I've sort of been saying we're making progress and not detailed updates, but we also have a chance for Councillor Hoyle or for Chief Alcock to sort of update. Our July 9th council meeting has been canceled due to no agenda items. July 23rd, they can give a brief update to council so that council knows. But our council is fully sort of supportive of this committee doing its work and doesn't really want to tinker with it until it comes back to them. So if we try for the first 2 weeks of September after Labor Day, when there's not a regular council meeting, I think that might meet your requirements.
yeah, I'm just thinking we need to have FaceTime with each other and get right people's opinion.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so our next scheduled committee meeting is July 22nd. at which point we're going to bring that information back. Is the expectation that the committee will have the information needed to make a recommendation at that meeting, or are we looking at, because I think our committee meeting schedules only took us to the end of July. Are we looking at now having to schedule additional committee meetings in August? Or is there a reason why we can't do the joint council meeting in August? Why does it have to be mid to end September?
I will say, to the committee chair, I'm, no objection from Port Colborne staff. I will tell you that August does have the AMO conference. I have a council member and a few staff at it. And it just vacations generally. But if we could find a date that works for all the parties, we can definitely go towards the latter half of August.
Yeah, if you guys can make a date that works, I'm okay with that, right?
So then, Mr. Chair, we can take it offline, and the chief, myself, and both CAOs and both clerks can sort of maybe do some polling of council and staff that are required at the meeting and make the best possible date before or after Labor Day.
Okay. Okay, so we'll leave that up to you on that. There's no delegations. Action items are you're going to work on savings. I need a motion to adjourn this meeting. Oh, go ahead. Okay. Okay, so I need a motion to adjourn. Scott? Mallory? Tim? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.